every single week. So that.
Well, my finally booted.
Hello and welcome to a new semester of the Security Seminar, the CERIAS Security Seminar from Purdue University. Our first speaker of this semester is Scott Andersen. Scott is the Director of Cloud Computing at Lockheed Martin. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you. So 1 second while my slides load here. I apologize for not being prepared. I've been running late all day. I actually grew up in Bloomington, Indiana, so I thought I knew where Purdue was. But apparently my GPS was smarter than I was, which is probably a lesson to be learned. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about a couple of things. I'll do a brief introduction to myself and then talk to you a little bit about a concept that literally is going to change the federal government over the next couple of years and the way the federal government does IT security, and all the component pieces that they do. And that's the concept of cloud brokerage. So I'm old enough, I have to take my glasses off to see anything close, and I have to put my glasses on to see the rest of you. So I apologize for that. It's and I need to kick this out, I assume, right? So it can be seen?
No, you're good.
It's good? Okay. All right. So the concept is welcome the cloud brokers. And cloud brokers have a number of interesting definitions. One of the big definitions that's out there is, of course, what NIST has put out, and a cloud broker is, for them, an aggregator of services. But I'm going to talk a little bit about what we think cloud brokers are going to be. And in particular, because we are a global security company, one of the things that we want to make sure is that brokers start off with a secure offering. I represent a group within Lockheed Martin that's called the Center for Cloud Computing Innovation, that is part of our Information Services and Global Services group, IS&GS. We are headquartered out of Gaithersburg, Maryland. I am actually the director of that group, although at this particular juncture, I don't do any of the work. All the guys that work for me actually do the work. I'm just the person that goes to orals and talks to customers about what might be. So, you know something's really important when it makes it into Dilbert. And cloud computing has actually been in Dilbert a number of times. I won't bore you with the details. This particular instance is really a great conversation that Dilbert has with his boss around the concept of the boss's fear of the internet, but also the fear of new software, new solutions, and software actually seeking out data on the internet and destroying it. The funny thing is Scott Adams published this 7 years ago. And 7 years ago, what he published was considered funny. Does anybody think that's funny now? Has anyone ever sought information out on the internet and destroyed it on purpose? Taken websites offline? Destroyed countries, companies, data, whatever they could get their hands on? It's not funny anymore. But think about this. 7 years ago, that's what, and of course I had to do the other one. This one's more along the lines of this is the concept of building a new data center. The federal government has, in the last 6 months, closed 50 data centers. 50. And 500 data centers in the last 9 years. 500 data centers. They've closed. The Department of Interior, this being a land-grant university, you guys care about the Department of the Interior because you exist because of a land grant out of the Department of Interior, has 400 data centers today. They have data centers in little cities with 3 people and a data center. A full secure data center with a TSA guy who has to be there every day and shoot you if you try to get into the building. A lot of waste, a lot of money, a lot of problems. And the problem is that the federal government thinks about the cloud like a lot of us do. The cloud's that nice fluffy thing on top. I usually joke when I start out, and I just did this talk to a bunch of folks at Lockheed, and I started off with picking my iPhone, holding it up and saying, could everybody move forward? Because somebody in the back of the room is actually sitting on my iCloud, and I can't get my data out of it right now because you're sitting on it. When he got everybody to move forward, which was my intent, I don't know if you've noticed, I taught 2nd grade when I first got out of Indiana University. See, Indiana University, we don't produce engineers, we produce teachers, right? So I started out as a 2nd grade teacher, and I used to always have to tell my class, don't sit in the front of the room. Mr. Andersen needs a little space, I like to pace, go to the back of the room. Now, many years later, I talk to adults, and which row fills up, right? You walk into a classroom, what's the first thing you think? Crap, the back row's full. And you know, you don't want to sit in the front. Well, it's the same at Lockheed Martin. When you go to one of these internal conferences, everybody's in the back of the room, and the front of the room is completely empty. So I did that joke. But the concept and the reality is there's so much more beneath that we don't think about. Some people show this as an iceberg. I used to be a huge fan of Titanic stuff, so I spent a lot of time, thinking about the Titanic, and I actually worked for a company that resembles the Titanic right now. But the Titanic had 2 choices, right? They could turn away from the iceberg or they could turn into the iceberg. And they've modeled it. I don't know if anybody watches Discovery Channel. I'm kind of an addict, but they modeled it. If the Titanic had turned into the iceberg, it wouldn't have sunk. And if it actually turned away from the iceberg, it wouldn't have sunk. Why did it sink? Because the Titanic took 1.2 miles to turn, enough to miss that iceberg, and they started turning about 1,100 yards away, or a little less than half a mile, a little over 2/3 of a mile. So there's a lot there beneath the surface. And the thing about an iceberg, right, is never what's bopping on the top of the ocean. It's what's underneath. And what's underneath is what's missing right now. So we're going to talk a little bit about the concept of the broker. Because the way NIST has it is the broker is an aggregator of services. Anybody here ever done business with a company called ServiceMaster? Anybody ever used Anybody ever used Merry Maids? You guys are probably a little young for this, but ServiceMaster owns a company called Merry Maids. They also own a company called Roto-Rooter. They also own a company called ServPro. ServPro comes and cleans up after fires. They own a bunch of companies. They're an aggregator of services. They pull together a bunch of offerings. I actually worked with them about 10 years ago and helped them consolidate their 11 mail systems into one. Because you know what the CEO wanted to do? He wanted to send one email. You know what they didn't do, though? If you bought Merry Maid services and the maid did a great job and they gave you the note saying, please pay X amount of dollars for the service we provided, they didn't leave you a coupon for TruGreen that they also owned. They didn't leave you a coupon for ARAD, pest control, that they also own. They didn't tie their services together, which is what a broker will do. They will aggregate a set of services and they will tie them together in a unified package for the organization. They will present one face for the organization to consider as they consume a series of cloud services. I was actually speaking with some of the folks in the room earlier. The other side of what a broker will do is provide security around all of that, from whatever agency in the federal government buys the service to deliver to the company that sells the service and back again with a secure process all the way through. Be it a secure network, be it a secure connection, be it encrypted data, in flight, at rest, or whatever else data might want to do. So the broker concept is very much like blindfolding a bunch of scientists and putting them in a room with an elephant and asking them, only allowing them to touch once, what the heck are you in a room with? And you see, of course, that they come up with a variety of things. The other side of this is you could say the elephant is a mouse designed to committee specifications, but we aren't making Congress jokes today. I have to be nice, I work with Congress. So what does this broker do? So what you're going to see is not the NIST definition, but this is what Lockheed is heading towards. The concept of a cloud broker. And I'll make sure that, Joel, I'll send you these slides so you can share them with the universe. They're not proprietary yet. There's part of it that is, but I'll take that out. So the concept here is an agency says, I need email. Everybody needs email. How many people in this room have an email account? You know, when I went to college, if you said how many people in the room have an email account, you know how many people would have raised their hands? Other than me? Yeah. One geek in the room and the rest of the people would have gone, what? What's email? Why do I need email? So the concept is, I need email. So on the far left-hand side of the diagram, you see there's the agency. They request email of GSA. And what GSA has is a set of offerings that come out of a service catalog provided by a broker. So that would be Google, $4.71 for 25 gig per user per month. Nice number. If you read the current trend on the internet, and if you type in Google versus Microsoft, you'll see that Microsoft is now at $3.07 per user per month, 25 gig. How many people here have more than 25 gig in their mailbox? Be honest. Yeah, so do I. Actually, that's why my hand's still up. I actually have closer to 60 gig, I think, now. I don't throw anything away. It's the problem that I have with email. But I buy email from that broker service. That broker then goes out and shops what I'm looking for. Now, I've provided a set of parameters that I need. And there's a variety of things you can have with email, right? You can have secure email. You can have signed email. You can have email that integrates with Office. You can have email that integrates with OpenOffice. You can have email that specifically integrates, I don't know, Apple. You want to have it iPhone compatible. You can have email that integrates with a good client. You can have email that integrates with a third-party broker software package yet. You could have email that specifically operates in a VDI environment and doesn't allow for actual physical machines. All of those parameters are things that the customer goes through in the service catalog, and then when it's done, the broker says, okay, you've said you don't want to pay more than $5 a month. You want to have this available on every device you have. You want this to be secure. You want this da-da-da-da-da. You need to have a mailbox here. Do you want me to create? Yes or no. When the user clicks yes, the mailbox is created. The other side of what brokers will need to do, and you'll notice there's two tiers of broker services. Brokers will negotiate with cloud service providers, but brokers will also provide specialized services themselves, but they'll also provide tier 2 services. So, and this is kind of funny to me because when I started out in IT, and we had lights, but we just barely had gotten computers. When I started out in IT, the first thing that we used to talk about back then was, what was infrastructure? When I started out in IT, the only thing that was infrastructure were the routers, the physical cables that connected the routers, and any network connections you had outside of your company. That was it. That was infrastructure. Today, infrastructure is email, security, it is collaboration services, a lot of different things. So as we think about this, the broker's going to provide a number of services that are very specialized services. For example, if we look at the Federal Government Information and Security Act, which is called FISMA, FISMA has 3 levels: low, medium, and moderate. Low, medium, and high. Medium and moderate being the same. Those 3 levels require a different level of commitment to achieve. One of them has really stupid rules. Like FISMA High, you cannot have a non-US national ever touch the data. Why? Well, we could talk about why. It's fairly anti-competitive, it's fairly not fair, but the reality is it's there to control the ability of a foreign national to gain access to information. FISMA High also requires that you have a certain number of people that are certified top secret. That means you've gone through the Defense Department background check. They've looked at everything you've ever done. I did mine. It was an interesting process. I literally had just left Microsoft, went through the process. The first thing the guy asked me was, you went to China? I said, yeah, I spent 4 weeks in China twice, working with Magna Motors out of Canada, and working with the government of China. He said, oh, okay. 10 minutes later, you went to China. Yeah, I went twice. We talked about it before. Oh, yeah, okay. You went to China, didn't you? Yeah, twice, actually. Still have an open visa, by the way. It's expiring in 3 or 4 days, but it's still open. He asked me, you went to China 5 times, by the way, because it made him nervous. It made him uncomfortable that I went to a country that he perceived as not the finally passed. But you have to have a certain number of people with top secret, certain number of people with secret, certain number of people with SCI, which is the top level of security clearance. That's where they give you the polygraph and hook you into the machine and torture you and all that stuff. So all of those levels are critical and important, and those are all determining factors in what a broker might offer. So a broker might say, we, as the broker, are FSMA moderate, which, how many people have heard of FedRAMP? And I'm going to apologize. If I spew out a bunch of acronyms that you guys don't know, throw something at me. So FedRAMP is the federal government policy that was just passed. And what it is that you're going to take your solutions as vendors, universities, everybody. You will present it to the federal government, and they will say, yea, verily, we bless this solution. And that's the last time you ever have to have your solution blessed. The way the U.S. federal government works today, you have to go per solution. So imagine every contract the federal government does. Built into that contract is the cost of going to get what's called a provisional authority to operate, PATO, which, by the way, costs about $100,000. And on top of that, then you have to go get the full ATO, which costs about another $100,000. So every contract the federal government has $200,000 baked into it that basically tells the government it's okay to use the solution. FedRAMP fixes that problem. Theoretically saves us, Lockheed, millions of dollars, saves the federal government millions of dollars, and for those of you future taxpayers in the room, saves you hundreds of dollars out of your first paycheck because they won't charge you that anymore. So that's kind of what a broker will do. They'll have specialized offerings that they offer. Another thing that the broker might offer is software that's really difficult to upgrade. There's probably 10 or 12 packages out there today that nobody ever upgrades. You go to a company, you sit down, you say, what's your help desk software? And they say, we use Remedy. And then you say, oh, okay, cool, I read about that in school. Remedy 6.5.4 is the current shipping version. What are we running? 4. But that's 8 versions ago. Yep. Why haven't we upgraded? Because you don't upgrade Remedy. You just don't. It's a pain. It's painful. So brokers will probably offer software like Remedy, custom, specialized solutions that the broker will offer. The other question, and feel free, by the way, at any point, if something tweaks your thought process to interrupt. The other thought that we have at Lockheed right now is the concept of, over time, will brokers absorb CSPs? I don't see CSPs becoming brokers because I see a preclusion occurring. I believe, I now am entering the phase of this, not blessed by Lockheed Martin, my personal opinion. Please note, it's on video, so it has to be, it's legal now. My personal opinion is that there will be people that are precluded from bidding as brokers because they have relationships that span what a broker can do and beyond. IBM is an example. HP is an example. Infosys, which has brokerage software, which you can go look up on the internet right now, is a very interesting package, will be banned because they're not a US-based company. There will be a number of reasons why some companies will be banned from bidding for this brokerage opportunity. And because of that, and in that process, we'll see a significant number of companies that will. I believe personally it's a bad idea to let a small business do this. Even though it's a cool idea to support small business, I believe at this point a small business will not be able to handle this. Because there's one more part of the brokerage relationship that is a quantum shift in the way computing has been done for the past 30 years. A huge shift. Anybody here use Microsoft Word? Okay. It's on your PC, right? How many people read the EULA? How many people you know what a EULA is? Seriously, what's a EULA? End user license agreement, thank you. You know that your computer has a EULA on it? Windows or Linux or Office has a EULA on it. What does it say? Do you know what your EULA says? It says mine, not yours. I, Microsoft, I, Open Source Administration Corporation, whichever group you got the software from, I own it, you don't. You are licensing it for that machine. If you move it off this machine, you have to tell me. Because you don't own the license, you own the license for that machine. What the federal government would like the software vendors to do is to change that model. Because today they do all the licensing. Why is that advantageous for a software company to want the federal government to license software agency by agency? Why is Walmart successful? Why did Walmart beat Kmart? They both had the same things. Yeah.
Well, I would think that they would want to separate it by department because usually if you sell
Can't hear it.
a million copies of one thing, you can get a lower price, but if you only sell 100 copies, it's usually a higher price.
Being the Walmart model. So he was talking about the fact that if you sell 1 million copies, it's cheaper than if you sell 1,000 copies. Yeah. The Walmart model. Why did Walmart drive Kmart out of business? They had many more Walmarts and they sold everything at the same low prices across the board, countrywide. They went out of their way to buy things en masse, so when they delivered it store by store, it was always the same price every day. Kmart fluctuated and didn't sell as many items, and Walmart basically drove them into the ground. That's the model. The software companies don't want to allow that. Why is that? Well, I think in fairness to Larry Ellison, he does need to put fuel in his jet, so we do need to support Oracle keeping their pricing. But why don't the software vendors want that to happen? Because the federal government represents 6.25 million seats, of which there are 49 enterprise agreements today with Microsoft in the federal government, and a number of what they call select and other agreements. It would drop the price that the federal government pays software every year to Oracle, Microsoft, and other organizations by roughly 60%. 60%. You want to talk about fixing the deficit? Stop paying for software 4 times. Pay for it once. So they want to be able to do that. But now, not only do they want that, they want the vendor, broker, to own it. And they simply rent it. They rent the software. How many people in this room have ever used Visio? How many people have it installed on their PC all the time? How many people use it every day? I use it every day. I love Visio, but I take notes in Visio. I'm a Visio geek. Most people don't use it. The number of hands that went up, about 4. The number of people that have it on their desktop all the time, 4. But the people that use it every day, the crazy guy up front. Not a great percentage of people use it all the time. Think about all the apps on your PC that you use every once in a while. Not every day, but just every once in a while. Then I apologize, my sons used to say once in a while, so it kind of sticks in my head. Think about all the software you use just every once in a while. Then think about this. If you didn't have to buy that software, you could rent it. How much more software would you use? How many more things would you consider? How many more options would you have? That's what the federal government wants. They want the broker to own the portfolio, not them. Now, what does that mean? Well, if I'm the broker and I go buy licenses for the entire federal government at $6.25 million, and the federal government severs the broker relationship, what do I do? Because I now own 6.2 million licenses. What do I do with those? Do I turn around and sell them to somebody else? What do I do? So small business is going to be in trouble. The 6.2 million licenses of Microsoft Exchange and Word and Excel, etc., probably in the neighborhood of $180 to $200 million a year. Every year.
Question.
Yeah.
So should we think of this broker as a company that the federal government is trying to outsource all its IT operations to? Is that what it is? Or?
The question is, should we think of the broker as an outsourcing organization for IT? And actually, no. A broker would only do cloud services that the government wanted to buy. They would not. There are a number of companies that do outsource federal services today. I work for one. SAIC is one. Northrop Grumman is one. HP is one. So on and so forth. That's a different entity. The broker would only be reselling cloud services to the government.
No, would this
Can
be?
you ask a question? Please push the button so that the
I don't think he doesn't have a button here. Just come up here and you can talk into my. I'll share.
Oh, okay. So would this? So would this be the actual cloud provider, like Google, Microsoft, and so
Yes.
on, or would it be some intermediary between the cloud provider and the
The
government?
broker will sit between. So if you look over
Yeah.
on the diagram, the broker will actually sit between the cloud service provider, which could be Google, Microsoft,
Okay.
right? And we would sit between that model. Except, yeah, go ahead.
Then the broker will be acting as a facilitator between, I guess what I'm trying to say is providing those software as like a service on demand.
Yeah.
So
it
buy
could be-
buy
So-
whatever you want
So
when
that,
you
and
want it.
that's a perfect thank you. I'll give you $10 afterwards because that's a lead into the next slide. Excellent question. So the concept then is how do they deal with the various deployment models within the NIST definition of cloud computing? The first being infrastructure. Now, there's a reason why infrastructure has to be different. So when a cloud broker goes and builds an infrastructure as a service relationship with an agency, they're going to have the lowest possible cost solution for that agency that they'll provide through the service catalog. But the IaaS relationship will be directly between the agency and the cloud service provider, with the broker only providing Tier 2 help desk if the agency requests it. The reason for that is, think about what infrastructure represents now. That's your email, that's your collaboration, that's your virtual desktop, that's the universe. If that's not operating and you don't have that functional, as an organization, you're in trouble. So the cloud broker would only do this initial process of connecting them together, managing the pricing. So things like this would occur. You as an agency have purchased IaaS from me through cloud service provider Google. Google then works with you to get everything set up, does all the support services, all of that. But it just so happens that you guys have built a company and you're doing iPhone application design and development and delivery. And it happens that Windows Azure all of a sudden has a cheaper virtual machine for developing specifically iOS apps. We would notify you and say, listen, we're going to move you from Google to Azure because it will save you X amount of money per month. The broker's job in that point would be to save you money and to manage those relationships for you. So instead of the federal government going out and having 1,000 relationships across all the vendors in the world, they have one with a broker, and the broker does the 1,000. The broker does the one-to-many, then the agency has a one-to-one relationship with the broker to make it easier for IaaS. The other side of that, though, as you were bringing out nicely, is the other model of SaaS, software as a service. Now, this is one where you're going to see the broker offer the concept of the cheapest SaaS. So I want email. I need email that does bup, 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 and bup. Okay, that's cool. CSP for you is Google. We'll move your mailboxes for you. Now, the broker would provide the technical services that would move, the transition that would move the mailbox. The broker would provide that Tier 2 help desk, right? So the first thing that always happens, right, I can't get to my email. The Tier 1 person asks the following 3 questions. Is your computer on? Are the blinky, blinky lights blinking? Can you see anything besides Google? That's the 3 questions they ask. Beyond that, a Tier 1 person is not going to troubleshoot more than that. That's just not their job. So they pass it to the Tier 2 person who's going to ask you things like, are all the lights on in your building? Can you access another website besides Google? Are you typing Google in or have you misspelled it? All of those things, that's what a Tier 2 help desk would represent. And then Tier 3 is the vendor, and that's actual break fix of a service itself. Now, in this model, in this SaaS model, the broker may offer highly specialized services. We talked about Remedy. There are a number of other highly specialized services a broker may offer. There's a number of groups in the federal government that are shockingly unwilling to share information of any form. I know that probably amazes you. It's not the IRS. They all have 3 letters, but they don't have names. Or if they do have names, you're not allowed to mention the names because nobody talks about them. But these agencies that don't have names, they like to have things in what they call highly secured environments. And a highly secured environment, that's not only the guard that will shoot you, but that's the guard that shoots you if you even start walking up the path. They don't wait for you to get to the door, they just shoot you. They also have things like they want top secret connections. They have secret networks. Anybody here ever heard of ARPANET? ARPANET was the precursor to the internet built by the Defense Department. It connected universities together. In fact, the University of Illinois had the first supercomputer when I was in college. We used to play on Plato. It was our Saturday afternoon in my dad's office at IU. We used to go play with Plato. He wasn't really the Plato I expected because he never answered any of my questions, but it was fun to do it. But ARPANET became two other networks. They're called SIPRNet and NIPRNet, and those are two secured networks that you have to actually have a validated connection to, that they actually come audit you and make sure that you're legitimately connected to those two networks, legitimately maintaining the security policies that they want. So in that scenario, a broker might offer a SaaS offering that's connected to SIPRNet. I can't think of anything. It would not be email or collaboration. It would probably be, anybody ever seen Google Earth? You guys know that like our government uses Google Earth for everything, right? They take census data, lay it over the top of Google Earth. They put all the data for Arab Spring, laid it over Google Earth, and you were able to pinpoint exactly where the outbreaks were occurring, when they were happening, what was happening, who was saying what about what. If you could look at the map right now, it would probably be focused on Syria. But those types of applications would sit on those networks, and you would have an analyst there who would look at those things, and the data would probably be provided by an outside source. The last and the most interesting right now is PAS. And interesting in that PAS probably, of all three right now, so everybody knows what IaaS is, pretty much. If you say infrastructure as a service, everybody kind of gets what that means. They kind of understand it. It kind of fits. SaaS, software as a service, everybody says, oh, that's Salesforce.com, right? That's Microsoft Online. That's Google. We can pretty much put that the way it is. PaaS offers an interesting problem in the broker space because PaaS environments pop up all the time, and there are probably 100 of them right now that all have a legitimate shot at existing in the future. And PaaS environments vary deeply in what they do and don't offer. I would think, personally, if you asked me, Scott, what would you want in a PaaS environment? I would want a PaaS environment that would let me write the entire stack, top to bottom. IaaS, SaaS, PaaS, all together in one entity across the board. I can do it from one platform, one development suite, and go across all levels. Those don't exist today. Everybody says they can do it, but I promise you they're not telling you the truth. And so what you're going to end up with, I think, is PaaS being offered very similar to the way SaaS will be offered, where the broker will offer very specialized PaaS. There are instances. So, for example, this is a great device, an iPhone. It's a great device. I enjoy my iPhone. I have a bunch of apps on it. It was great on the plane. I was reading the Steve Jobs biography on an iPhone. I thought that was kind of apropos, to read about Jobs on his device. But the military's decided that the iOS is a little weak. In fact, they've decided iOS is incredibly weak. In fact, they actually have said it's got more holes in it than Swiss cheese. And good Swiss cheese has a lot of holes. They like Android. Now, the Android phones that the Department of Defense gives out, though, aren't the phones that you go buy at T-Mobile, by any means. In fact, they're not anything like the phones that you buy at T-Mobile. They're completely rewritten Android, and they develop it. And so what, in that scenario, the broker would offer is a secure Android development environment that is top secret, that would have that Android kernel. A lot of civil agencies don't use the secured environment for their phones. They simply use BlackBerries, or they use devices that are less risk enabled in the market. They would just use a traditional PaaS environment. But in that case, you'd have a secure PaaS environment for the DoD guys that are building Android devices specific to the field. You might also have a secured PaaS environment that would allow people to go and pull census data. Everybody always looks at me funny when I say this, but there's more information about people in 3 databases sitting in 3 buildings in Washington, D.C., then I think if anybody knew it, first of all, those would be the first 3 buildings that people would bomb. But there are 3 organizations of the federal government that know everything about you. The IRS, CMS, which is the medical system of the Health and Human Services. It's where Social Security, Medicare, pull all the medical data that they know about. And then last but not least is a fabulous little database that I can't talk about. But those three instances contain everything about you in the universe. Those ought to be able to be pulled into a secure environment so people can manipulate it. People can use it. One of the things that's intriguing that probably would have saved this country a lot of money is that if we had tracked the home sales in this country starting 40 years ago, we would have noted the trend a year and a half before it actually hit the newspapers. So we would have known there was a problem, and we could have stopped it. Instead, once something starts, what can't you do usually? Once the ball's rolling downhill, have you ever noticed? Roll a ball down a big steep hill and chase after it. It's a lot harder to stop that ball once it's rolling than it is to stop it before it rolls. It's psychological. You reach down, you miss the ball. It's just the way the mind works, but it's also the way our economy works. We missed the ball. That data's there, though. All of that data sits there. All sorts of statistical trends about the country that we live in. And by the way, that statistical trending is the greatest security tool that the world has ever seen. Do you know why? What's the one thing a terrorist organization has to be able to do to be effective? 4 letters. Hide. Close. What's the other part of hide? Because they don't usually like to hide. They're usually out in the open, and they like to move. They like to move, and they move constantly. What does movement do in databases? It triggers change. And if you track change, guess what you can do? You can track where the terrorists are going. So that's all information that people ought to be using and getting at, but we can't get at it because it's sitting in these little things, and that's what the brokers will start to offer. The other side of what brokers are going to offer and what we believe will offer is truly the intelligence information. So we Lockheed Martin, just turned into Adobe that they had a fatal flaw in the reader software. You all got an update about a month ago because of Lockheed Martin. It was our fault. Sorry about that. It was 7.25 meg, so it was a fairly substantial flaw. We found that because we actually have a group of people that run a database. And that database simply goes out and trolls the internet for known hacker sites. And we started noticing that there was chatter. Started off with reader bug and then it disappeared. Went into code. Well, our guys have been doing that for so long now, they knew what the code was. They realized, hey, there's a problem here. We let Adobe know. That's the kind of stuff that you can capture in these types of broker scenarios where we're capturing this information at a secure level for all of the agencies and able to provide that back to them in a very secure manner so they can begin to play offense. The best part of playing offense when it comes to security, if you have 7 systems, the hacker has to be right 7 times. How many times do you have to be right? Once. Anybody ever played craps? If I gave you 7 shots at the dice, how many people here could roll 12? Well, statistically, what's a room of, what do we got in here? 30 people? 40 people? About 12 of you, statistically. What if I let you weight the dice? How many people could roll 12? 40. All of you, right? Well, unless you really screwed up and threw them too hard. But hopefully you knew they were weighted, so you wouldn't do that. Right? If you can game the system a little bit, you can actually secure it more. So and thank you. That was an excellent question. Whoop. What did I do? I think I just, yeah, I did the wrong thing. All right. So some initial questions that we have. This one's the one that makes me nervous. This is what keeps me awake if anybody's curious at night. Who owns portability? Portability is this funky little thing that NIST wrote into their document. If you go search NIST, cloud, computing, reference, architecture, look up the word portability. They say portability means I can take my solution and I can put it here on the fly. Can I do that today? By the way, these two are completely incompatible. They don't operate together. BlackBerries and iPhones don't work together. I can't move them easily. I can move them to an intermediary and then pick them up with the other device, but I can't move them easily. So portability scares me. What portability really means is I can pick your solution up and I can put it in any other system. Amazon costs $9.99 today, but guess what? Rackspace is offering $1.99 for a 30-day virtual machine. Boom, I'm putting all your virtual machines on Rackspace. And by the way, you gave me $100,000 for this month, I'm going to write you back a check for 50. How's that sound? That's a good business relationship to be in. Every time I save you money, I write you a check back. Will the software companies allow these vendors to actually make these changes? Will it be allowed? Because they all stand to lose money. It would be really sad if Larry could no longer sponsor the America's Cup race. I would feel bad for him. It costs about $100 million to build one of those boats. It would be unfortunate. Is this the cataclysmic change that cloud produces for the software industry? Do we see the death of big software vendors out of this? When you become a software rental shop, you don't make as much money, which means you don't have as much for R&D. And if you don't have as much for R&D, what does that mean? Crowdsourcing becomes a better way to go. Open source becomes the model, and we no longer are reliant on software vendors that lock us in. Is this the Marxist overthrow of the software world? Sorry, couldn't resist the crack there. And then finally, once that happens, can a broker afford to lose a customer at that point? Because if you've got all this and you've invested all that into this customer, can you afford to lose them? The answer to that, unfortunately, I think is no. Who can be a broker? So, of course, I believe solution integrators, shockingly, because I work for one. But I believe we can because we have a number of relationships. We span multiple organizations and we're agnostic across those organizations. And we have frameworks that will allow us to support new CSPs coming online. I actually wrote an assessment for a cloud service provider. And I've actually got a very detailed process to go through and look at everything, even down to calling Dun & Bradstreet and saying, what's their rating right now? Because guess what happens when a company slips from A to B? If you read Jim Collins' work, How the Mighty Fall, if you slip from A to B in Dun & Bradstreet, the slip from B to C happens a lot faster. A to B may take 5 years. B to C can happen in 5 months, 5 days, if you're in the wrong place. So, solution integrators. Small business, but they're going to lock in customers. A small business who becomes a cloud broker will never be able to let go. But they're going to be more agile. They're going to be able to offer things at a broker level that a big system integrator probably can't offer as quickly. And they'll have an ability to partner with a CSP in a one-to-one relationship where the CSP has more ownership in the process than they would with a system integrator. Universities. Why wouldn't Purdue become a broker? In fact, why wouldn't Purdue stay your broker? Part of coming to Purdue, to get your degree, you have to sign a piece of paper that says, I promise Purdue I will continue buying my software from Purdue for 10 years after I leave the university. But why wouldn't universities become brokers and own all those licenses? And the last question, does a broker need to be agnostic? So if we look at the two brokers that right now Forrester says are the number 2 biggest brokers that are out there. One is Capgemini and one is Infosys. I've worked with both those companies for many years when I was at Microsoft. I worked on a number of opportunities with them, partnered with them on a number of opportunities. They're both great companies. Not knocking either company. But the question I have is, they're also both very heavy cloud service providers. Infosys has a cloud in India today that outsources thousands of small businesses. Capgemini has a huge outsourcing business in Europe. Huge. Massive. Can they be agnostic? Well, we have our solution, and we have Google's solution. And we recommend our solution. It's much cheaper and better for you, and your teeth will be whiter than Google. There's any of that down here. So that's the other question. All right. Why would you be a broker? Well, first of all, it's kind of a cool name, right? It's kind of the in thing. Everybody likes to be the future. Number one, you want to be vendor agnostic. You're truly committed to being vendor agnostic. You look at every solution and every CSP as who has the right answer to the question, not whose business card looks the coolest. Because frankly, Google has the best business cards in the business, period. You have a hybrid cloud solution today that allows you today to span multiple CSPs. That means you can build machines in Azure. You can build machines in the new Google infrastructure. You can build machines in Terramark. You can build machines in Amazon. And the other side of building them is you can destroy them via DISA encryption completely, fully and completely wipe them. You can support a distributed security model. I actually spoke with somebody earlier today. You guys are working on a very interesting project, which intrigues me, in that he's looking at how do I break an application that's on-premise up and put it into the cloud? And what can I do to secure that? And how can I make sure that the security is at least the same as it was before? I'd like to think if we get really good at this, we can actually make the security in the cloud better. Why? Because the guys who are sitting there managing 10,000 applications versus the person that manages one, 10,000 apps, you're going to see infinitely more security flaws. You're going to react to infinitely more security problems. Finally, you have a PMO, a logistics organization, and an operations team. And I'm talking about an operations team that is thinking about why operating a cloud is different. Yeah, you get efficiencies of scale. Yeah, it's less expensive. Yeah, it's kind of a cool thing. But you got to think about what does operations in the cloud mean ultimately for your organization. Implementation models, these are the same, PaaS, SaaS, all the way through. The thing that's important here, one contract vehicle for the organization with the broker, but they could have services all around the world and it wouldn't matter. Or they can say we want all our services in the US, and that's certainly another option that can be considered. Yes, we can control your services. Yes, we can keep them all in the US, whatever you want to do in that mode. All right. So here's some interesting models that I pulled off the internet. The one in the lower right-hand corner is the one that intrigues me the most right now because I think that's actually closest to what I believe to be the model of the future. And again, I'll send Joel these slides. You don't have to stare at them now. Otherwise, just put one hand over right eye and read the bottom line. All right. So the GSA announced an RFI about a month ago for cloud brokerage. They thought 3 people would apply and that they'd have 6 people at the industry day. They had 142 people at the industry day and they dropped the deadline to September 7th because they think they're going to get over 100 responses. They thought they were going to get 3. They're going to get over 100. Everybody and their brother wants to be a broker. And again, I'll send you the slides. You can ignore the text, but that's the actual official announcement. Monday, the Department of Defense announced that DISA is the Defense Information Security or Information Services Administration. DISA will be a cloud broker for the DoD. Intriguing. DISA turned right around and issued an RFP or RFI asking everybody else to come in and be a broker for them. And it's believed that they are actually going to submit a bid as a broker to the GSA. Because the one thing that the DoD does is they do physical and physical property seizure and all the other components of security at a better level. And again, you don't have to read that. Oh, by the way, if you want to have your response, it's due September 28th. All right, so that's it. This is for all the Purdue people in the room. This is an IU grad's way to say any questions. Thoughts, arguments, outright praise, questions. We have exactly 1 minute and 30 seconds for questions if you have any. Yes?
So where do you see broker services being deployed? Like, will you have to maintain your own data centers, or will you be just forwarding the request?
That's an awesome question. So the question is, where do I see broker services being deployed in terms of what? So in terms of what Lockheed Martin is doing, we've actually built 2 commercially, not commercially, 2 clouds that are available for federal agencies today. And we will actually host our brokerage on our facilities because we'll be able to secure them, we'll be able to provide the level of security. In the future, I would suspect that what you'll see is, again, brokerages that will come out in a variety of flavors. So if you look at, there's a company called LexisNexis based in Dayton, Ohio. LexisNexis aggregated the legal and law information world into one place. You want to know anything about case law in the US, you go to LexisNexis. That's where it all is. They aggregated all that. Their broker model was they centralized. I believe the computer broker model of the future will be a decentralized model where you'll go have relationships with maybe 5 brokers, and those brokers will provide very specialized services because that's what they're really, really good at. You may, however, go to a broker, if that's possible to create a new term, and a broker would actually broker relationships with other brokers to provide cloud service providers, and they would provide you with other services that you can't do yourself. It's a great question, thank you. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
How do you think the small businesses play a role into all these? Because so far I see, big box companies, big box services. How do you think the smalls? You mentioned that they might be attached to a bigger one, so they can provide the service to the end one. But do you see a growth in the small businesses services, I guess, to the end user?
That's a great question. So how do I see small business fitting into this? The first thing is, I think you'll see a big difference. A broker like Lockheed, because we're financially able to, we might have a 2-year agreement with a customer, whereas small business A might force you to sign a 10-year agreement with a severance penalty that'll cover them for a year to move those licenses somewhere else. So there'll be that, right? Contractually, there's a vehicle that they can use that'll keep them secure. I personally, if you were to ask my personal opinion, not the opinion of Lockheed, but my personal opinion, my belief is that you'll see small business take on a lot more of those agile niches that need to be filled, a lot more of those reactive software solutions. If you go on iTunes, right, and you go look at the App Store, notice how few of the big software vendors make iPhone apps. Most of those guys are 2, 3, 4-person shops. Small business making productivity apps that are really effective. That I see, that's the market where they're going to explode. I don't see them taking on the brokerage because in order to truly be a broker on the back end side, you do have to have the PMO, the support, and all of that infrastructure. And frankly, enterprise support is expensive. Microsoft pays about $6 billion a year for enterprise support. And does anybody in this room think they have great support? You want to hear a real quick joke about Microsoft support? Helicopter pilot's flying around Bellevue, Washington. He's completely lost. Flies up next to a building and he mouths, "Where am I?" The guy takes a whiteboard marker, writes on the window, "You're in a helicopter." The pilot goes, veers off, lands the helicopter. The guy sitting next to him goes, "How the heck did you know where you were based on that?" He said, "I knew I was at Microsoft support." The answer was technically correct, but totally useless. I used to work for Microsoft, so that's a fair shot. I was in Microsoft support for a while. So I see them providing a lot more of the niche stuff because they're going to be more agile. I don't see them becoming pure brokers because the broker infrastructure is going to be huge. And it's going to require a lot of willingness to take risk that a small business can't afford to. Because if you misstep and you're a small business, you're out of business. That's a great question. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Do you see in the federal realm? Do you see in the federal realm the same broker catering to FCI data and, let's say, secret data? And if you do, how would you prevent the commingling of data?
That's a great question. So the question is basically, how will you tier the data services you're providing to handle the security level required of the data? And what I think you'll see, and this is why I think small businesses will struggle, is I think you'll see the large system integrators build multiple data centers. We have 5 today. One is top secret, one is secret, one is unclassed, and that's how they'll do it. It'll go into a specific data center, then of course you'll have a duplicate somewhere else. So we have one in Lanham, which is on the East Coast, one in Altadena, which sits right next to a fault. I still don't understand that one. And we replicate the top secret cloud between those two. So that's the way that a broker will handle it today. Now in the future, when you can look at the concept of data tagging, it's conceivable that you won't need to do that you'll be able to tag the actual data, and the data itself will carry its tag that says, "I'm top secret, and by the way, you only have secret, you're not allowed to open me. And if you try to copy me, open me, or anything else, I'm going to send a nastygram to your manager. And if you try to move me, I'm going to send a nastygram to security. And if you try to delete me, I'm going to send security to take you out of the building." That kind of stuff. So that that I think is in the future. That's coming. It's possible today, but that takes a massive amount of IT infrastructure to manage, and it's not really easy to do. When we get to the point where we can actually classify data on the fly, what type of data it is, and secure it on the fly, then we won't need. But today it's going to be multiple tiered clouds. Great question. I think technically we're done. If you have other questions, I'm happy to stay after and talk. But I do appreciate everybody's time today. Thank you very much for inviting me, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Oh, thank you very much. Oh,